Welcome to the Market Like a Man podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. This is where ordinary entrepreneurs come for inspiration and education to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes until the job gets done. Look, when I made the leap from corporate America to running my own business, I had a wife, 5 kids, a mortgage, and they all wanted to eat and sleep in warm beds. I didn't have the luxury of hitting rock bottom while I found myself on my buddy's couch or in somebody's basement or going back home so mommy could dry my eyes, pat my back, and tell me everything is going to be okay while I find myself. Oh no. I had to put food on the table, a lot of food on the table, every single day, every week, every month. This is the no hype, cut to the chase material, ideas, and training I wish I had when I started down my entrepreneurial journey. This is one of the premier sales, marketing, and entrepreneurial programs available, and it's free. Make sure to stay up to date on everything I'm working on, along with additional content I don't have time to share on the podcast by signing up for the Weekly Whisper at weeklywhisper.com. If you're curious about where to start when it comes to taking control of your sales and marketing is just selling in print, you can get my sales agenda to use in your everyday sales life at thesalesagenda.com. Finally, get the on-demand help you need to grow your sales at 30daysalesgrowth.com. Enter the promo code podcast to save a few bucks on your order. If you have any questions on ways I might be able to help you here with my team at The Sales Whisperer, feel free to email me, Wes at thesaleswhisperer.com. That is my actual email address, and I read everything that is not stupid, spammy, or ridiculous. Now on to the show. Josh Kail, Glass Lantern Public Relations, lifting the fog on PR. Welcome to the Market Like a Man podcast. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
So what is going on? You reached out to me on Twitter. So who says social media doesn't work? But I like your approach, a no BS approach to media relations. And I am all about no BS here, although we can't use that name per se because Dan Kennedy has a lock on it, but we can still say no BS, right? So, so what does that mean? I mean, does press still work? You know, press releases, it seems like most of them are going into the trash bin. I mean, how can the average person leverage PR to their benefit?
Well, I think, talking about press releases in relationship to PR is a good way to start out, because I think in most people's mind, when they think of PR, specifically media relations, they think press release, which was a great tool back maybe 30 years ago, before internet and before fax machines, because you would actually have to mail out these documents to all of the press with all the information on it. So anything you wanted them to see had to be in this envelope sent out. It's not really an effective tool anymore, and it's not something that we push as a primary outreach point. If you have a news about your product or news about your company, you make a press release, and it's basically, if you think about it more as a tear sheet with all the needed information about what you do on it, so that a press agent can look at it, and if they want to use it, they can. If not, they throw it out. Everything's a lot more short form now. We focus on pitches. You take what the base of what you're doing is, what the fundamentals of why you're doing it, and you push that forward in news relevant ways. It's not about pushing what you do; it's pushing out why you do it and where you see it going, and that's where the value is. So the idea of focusing on a product or focusing on a service with a press release and a formal outreach in that sense is a lot less effective today than what it used to be.
So the why matters more. So give me an example.
So let's say you had, so one of the industries I work with or worked with in the past is, broadcast technology, right? So let's say you have a company and they came out with a new way to distribute or a better way to distribute video from, the TV station to your actual TV. It's not about saying, look at what we did. This is this new way of doing it, and here's our product, and it's called this, and here are the features, and here's how much it costs and go forward. Because, unless it's really revolutionary, no one's really going to be interested in it. But it's really talking about, why do we need a new way of broadcasting this information? How is this better than what's currently available on the market, or why is this technology better than what's currently on the market, and how does it solve existing industry conditions, challenges, and how does it solve theoretical ones that are just on a horizon. And you're talking about the bigger picture and the greater impact. Even with consumer goods, if you have just like an item that you're selling, it's not just about what it is, but how does this enhance the user's life, or whatever the purpose of that product is, and how does it overall enhance whatever it's going. So if you have a piece of smart technology, it's not just about the smart technology at hand, but how does this play into this future of a connected house, and bringing it on that where people actually care or are interested about.
So are you still doing just a typical press release? Like, would somebody buy software like from Vocus or somewhere and just push out their own, PR web? Is that effective, or do most people not know how to put two sentences together and need help from somebody like you?
It actually goes both ways. I mean, I'm not working on anything that, I'm not a rocket scientist, right? It's not the most impossible thing to do PR. Where the challenge comes in, and one is a budget issue, as far as, are you at a place where you can afford going to an external firm, and does that cost really benefit you at that point where you are in the business? Because you can do it internally. I would say don't put anything out over the wire. That's a waste of money, and the role of the wire has changed its purposes from what it used to be to basically, if you're a publicly traded company, the wire is great because it helps fulfill that obligation of letting everyone know what the company's doing in a very quick and massive scale. But for any individual company or private-owned company, you're going to get no return on it. No one reads those articles. It maybe increases SEO, but it does it on such a minuscule rate that a quality press that's going to do better for SEO than anything on the wire is going to be. As far as doing it yourself, right? You can to buy Vocus. It's depending on what services you get. That's going to be $8,000+ a year. Or Vocus's back decision just bought Vocus. So that's going to be an expense you have to take into account. But really, you can do it on the small scale. Anyone can do it on the small scale. But you have to think about it when you engage in PR on your own. It's the equivalent of starting out with only someone who's entry level. Because
what does that mean? I mean, what do you mean do it on a small scale? How do you do a? Are you doing a press release, or you're not even doing press releases? I mean, what are you talking about on a small scale?
Press releases, pitches, active news cultivation, reactive news cultivation. And what that means is active is coming up with stories on your own, saying, I have this product or service. This is relevant to my key industry in this way. Here's a news story about what that impact is. I think press should write about it, or I think the trade should write about it. I'm going to go out and say, look, write about this. I can provide expertise. I can provide material and data.
So what does that mean, though? I mean, somebody comes up with an interesting story on their angle, and then, like, literally look up the local newspaper reporter that covers the technology sector, if that's what you're in, and say, hey, write a story about me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, personally, if I look at when I first got out of school, and, one of the biggest challenges when I started doing PR a little over 10 years ago was that fear, right? You think about the New York Times and it's, the big publications, these big guys, they're so impressive. And it's actually, the more you think about it, it actually scares you from just reaching out and having a conversation with someone about it. But if you get past that, you think, here are people that are writing about the stuff that directly apply to me and should be interested in what I have to say to it, because I have a valid viewpoint for the industry. I have a valid viewpoint for these issues that they're writing about. Then going out and calling them and saying, here, this might be something that interests you, isn't a matter of them doing you a favor. You're actually working with them to create a better product for what they're doing.
Well, my experience, though, most people, especially entrepreneurs, business owners, are terrible salespeople.
Right.
So their pitch.
So that's balance, right? That's the
pitch is going to suck in the beginning, right? But should they just do it anyway? Just call Joe Blow reporter and fall on their face a couple of times? I mean, is there like a formula to maybe shorten the learning curve?
The falling on your face is the quickest way is the quickest learning curve, because you embarrass yourself once, and it becomes very memorable to fix it going forward. But I mean, that's the balance between going internal and external, because when you go external, you're bringing on people. Depending on where you're going, you're bringing on people with experience and have done all that, all those face plants back when they were, associate publicists or, interns or whatever, and they were given the freedom to make mistakes without ruining a client's life, and so forth. But yeah, I mean, really, it's the experience is really what it comes down to. If you can think on your own how to come up with a story, if you take what you have on hand in your arsenal of data, and you think, what would make an interesting news story for me, put it together, and then, go out and try pitching it, that's the nut of what you're doing. It's then figuring out what's the most effective way to get this communication across, who are the best people to talk to about it, what actually is interesting to everyone else and not just me, and trying to figure that out as you go. The real challenge comes in, and I think this is the point where most people decide, all right, I'm going to go to external or hire someone in-house, is it's extremely time-consuming. Writing a pitch and sending it out and emailing it doesn't take that long. It might take you an hour to write a pitch, and then, depending on how big of a media list you've created for yourself, an hour or so to email it out. But all the time after that is all the follow-up work to make sure people actually saw the email. You have conversations to get people's interest in whatever you're talking about. You have interviews scheduled. You provide material to back it up. You follow up to make sure things actually get written, because editorial calendars change, and suddenly something happens in the news that just knocks all the other stories out of the way, and you have to try to remind them that they're working on this after the big news event has passed. That takes a lot of time. For example, I just did a very simple client project where it was a consumer-based product. All it was sending out samples to blogs. We wanted them to write reviews about it and put it up. And the time it took to write the pitch, get it approved by the client, make any edits needed, distribute it out to the database that we had built, and get product in their hands for review took about 5 days, depending on shipping. But from that point to the point of getting it in the press and getting the first articles written took almost 2 months, because of a number of variables that came up between people being on vacation. Some people just took a month to review the product. Editorial calendars changed. So it was that constant follow-up with these people to keep them engaged and keep them interested and make sure that it actually goes to print, which is where the bulk of the work comes into play.
So you're just like you're a salesman of stories.
Yep.
Basically, you're like a project manager for stories.
Exactly. And sometimes we make the stories in-house, and sometimes we hear of existing stories and say, we have some stuff that might be of added interest to you, and enhance them.
Right. And so how does this work? I mean, it seems a little bit esoteric or subjective, right? Okay. Hey, I hire you, and what's going to happen? I mean, do you only take on good clients so that, there is a story there? Because, I mean, there's a chance nobody wants to run with the story you're pitching. Well,
I think that's where experience comes in. One, if I could only take on, all my clients are great, right? But if I could only take on good clients, that would make life a lot easier. But, and this is one of the things in that no BS PR stuff that I'm working against, is there's a lot of misinformation out as far as what PR is and what media relations is, at no fault to business owners, just because the information is so convoluted and seemingly contradictory to itself, and you hear one thing from one person and another thing from another. So when you go with any client, good client or bad client, and I'm actually about to have an article published on how to be a great PR client, regardless of that, you have the clients come in with certain expectations as far as what it is and what to see out of it. And so the first thing is really grounding those expectations and putting it into perspective as far as what the challenges are. As far as stories go, any product has a story to it. If it doesn't have a story to it, and this is regardless of media relations aspect, if your product doesn't have a story to it, there are not going to be any customers interested in it. There's not going to be that emotional or need connection to it if you're a wet noodle, right? A blank slate compared to what your competitors are doing. So you have that at the base level. Whatever you're doing, there has to be some aspect that's different than what some of your competitors are doing. Or there's some plans for where you're going in the future that you can talk about. Or there's some reason why you got into what you're doing that makes it more interesting to push forward. So it's discovering, what these angles are.
Right.
We don't do spin. We don't take stuff and be like, oh, this, and then add a bunch of hyperbole to it and ship it out and say, look how great this is, and then it gets a lot of coverage, and then ultimately what will happen is it'll fall on its face and everyone looks really bad as a result of it. So, that spin idea of PR is kind of like believing that PR is just press releases and spin is kind of like believing a trip to New York City is nothing but graffiti on the subways and crime in the streets, right? It's what you see in the movies because it's more interesting from a plot perspective than the day-to-day of it. But
I did notice that nobody in New York owns an umbrella.
Well, you're walking too fast to get wet, so.
In all of the movies, I was watching Daredevil on Netflix, and I realized nobody owns an umbrella in any movie in New York.
Right.
So,
I lived in New York City for 6+ years, and I never owned an umbrella.
Everybody just gets wet, or you just carry a raincoat? I don't get it.
Yeah, you get wet, but then you go inside and you're dry. That's basically it.
All right. Yeah, you just go from the cab straight to the office, right? So it's all good.
But when I was in New York, I could not afford a cab, but I would run in zigzags so the raindrops missed me.
Okay, so are there some shortcuts? Are there things people can do or not do to increase the chances if they're having to do this on their own?
Yeah, one is be honest. Don't cut corners on what you're saying. Don't devalue the reality of what your product or service is by adding stuff you think people want to see, because that's just going to turn back and bite you. When you're looking at how to write a story or come up with an idea that you really want to push out, think about, write the picture, write whatever you're trying to push out, and then try reading it as if you had no knowledge of what you had written about. And if you can understand what you're reading without having, you're like, oh, well, I know this works because of this and this and this, or, because that deal back then, this is why this came about. Because a lot of times we fill in the blanks in the head when we're writing it, and then what happens is you go back and it becomes material that the only way anyone's going to understand is if they have the prior knowledge. So try writing without prior knowledge, which is a challenge. But basically, if you have someone, a friend, this is the best way to do it, have a friend who's not really knows what you do on a day-to-day or what your product is, have them read it. And if they can regurgitate to you some basis of what that message is, then you're on the right track.
What's the old adage, like right to the 5th grade level, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, sometimes at 5th grade level, it's more of you can write intelligently, just be sure that you write comprehensively.
Right.
So the important stuff stays in and people understand what's going on. And then really, if you're limited in resources and time to do it internally, look at kind of like when you apply to college, right? You have your reach schools, and then you have the ones that, all right, I know I can get in. When you're making your media database, have those, those publications you really want to get into. That would be awesome, whether it's like the leading publication of whatever trade you're part of, or if it's a business publication like the Wall Street Journal, have those as your reach schools. But then look at what are the other ones, whether it's blog, print, video, whatever, that you read yourself or other people, customers have read or engaged with before, and go for those as well. Mm-hmm. Because PR is a numbers game. One great hit feels awesome. It's not going to be the make or break point of your career. PR is the long-term game of comprehensive and consistent messaging across as many boards possible to get your message out to your target audience.
What about when actually reaching out to that journalist? Should people call? Should you email them? Should you try to find them on Twitter or LinkedIn?
It varies. You'll get, you'll read about journalists saying, don't call me or just email me, or I don't use email anymore. Everything's on Twitter. It's kind of an individual taste from journalist to journalist. I had one journalist who, she's amazing, and she read every single email that came in, and the average journalist, and this is a conservative number, gets about 500 to 700 emails a day. Mm. This is pitches, responses across the board, all in all. So there's a lot going out there. What I would say is, email is a good way to get your stuff out to a lot of people. And follow-up calls go really well as far as getting through. Now, some journalists will get annoyed and tell you don't call them. And then you just put a note next to their name. This guy doesn't like to get called. This woman doesn't like to get called. And you move on from there. Sometimes they'll be belligerent with you. I mean, I've had people yell at me on the phone for no reason, just because I called them. They might have been having a bad day or whatever. Don't take it personally. Apologize for inconveniencing them. Put a note next to their name. Don't call this person and move on. And then over time, what will happen is you'll have this list of people that you've worked with, people you want to work with, and preferences on how they like to be contacted. And again, when you do it internally, there's a lot of trial and error and learning and building this as you go on. But over time, that it'll be effective. And then over a long period of time, as you get more successful, you'll say, I don't want to deal with this crap anymore. I'm going to hire someone else to take care of it for me and then work with you on it. Because, again, it's a very time-consuming practice.
So in other words, it's just like any other sale. I mean, come up with an interesting open, come up with a hook, find the decision maker, communicate with them in the manner that they prefer, and be diligent about it, be consistent until you get it done. Yeah,
but unlike with sales, with media relations effectively put into place, it actually enhances others. It enhances sales or other sales in that sense.
Right, but as far as making the sale, in the beginning, the end result is obviously what you're going after, but you got to make the sale. And what you're saying is there's not necessarily, there's no magic. It's just
I wish.
It sounds like you just got to be a great salesperson.
You got to be consistent, honest, and direct, and aware of what your market needs.
Yeah.
In this case, the market is the news cycle.
Yeah, and I can see. I mean, can anybody other than the business owner do this? It seems like in a small business, like I know with me, I've got a couple of assistants, but are they going to be able to pitch my story as well as I can? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that gets really interesting. I mean, that breaks down into certain strategy changes right there, because there are risks and there are benefits of doing that, right? Because no one can pitch your company better than you can. But that makes it a lot easier to fall in that trap of assuming there's prior knowledge on certain facts while you're talking about it.
Right.
So actually, my approach to media relations in general is, I learn my client's product line, I learn my client's company, and I learn my client's industry so that I can speak about it without pause or hesitation. But I don't learn it to the point where I can answer every question that's asked of me. And the reason I don't want to have that much knowledge over it is that that forces me to say, you know what, maybe you should talk to the CEO, or maybe you should talk to the head of product development, and they'll be able to go into much greater detail with you. From a PR perspective, when it's an external firm, I'm never the one that wants to be quoted on. So if you're looking at an internal sense of that, if you have someone within the company that you trust able to talk about it to a limited amount, what can happen is when they're going out and reaching out on your behalf, they can then offer up interviews with you directly, which may elevate your stance within the company. So it looks like, you're creating that opportunity for an interview rather than being the immediate interview on the spot, and making your company also seem a little bit bigger than what it might be. But it also allows for the journalist to get a little time to think about it and how they want to approach it, which is going to benefit you. If they're interested, because they'll be able to have a more in-depth story and get more involved with what you're talking about.
But I guess in a way though, this sale, this pitch, you can be much more direct, right? I mean, because these journalists are busy, just like the CEO or VP you're calling on for your normal sales,
right?
But I mean, would you say because they're journalists, you can be? I mean, can you take personality out and just cut to the bottom line, or are you still trying to build this relationship and and be nice and cordial, or is it, hey, cut to the chase, give me the facts. If I like it, we'll talk some more?
It's funny. Again, it's the same type of sense where it really depends on the individual. The relationship part is interesting, and I have a regular column with Fridge Business Magazine on the subject of PR, and one of my more popular articles was exactly that. What is the importance of the relationship with the press? Mm-hmm. For a PR professional, the relationship with the press is an interpersonal relationship with individual members of the press is more of a nicety than a requirement. Right? If a journalist knows me and likes me for who I am, even if they're rushed one day, they might not yell at me on the phone, or they might be a little more cordial, or say, look, call me back on this other day, or it might increase the likelihood that they answer the phone by like 3% or something like that. Right. But it won't be like, oh, my buddy Josh here always gives me great stuff, and he really needs this article run, so I'm going to run an article with him, even though the story might be terrible, or it's just not something I'm interested in, or I don't have space for it. It's never going to be the point where it tips the scale over where you're going to get coverage because of that. Right. The important relationship is between the journalist and the company that's being represented, not necessarily the individuals. It's more of the sum of the parts. So if your company gets the reputation of always providing excellent resources, great insightful interviews and story ideas, they're going to become more preferred if the journalist later on is working on a story that's relevant to you. They're going to think of the company name first, which is way
right, but that's later on. And, hey, once one story gets picked up, I'm going to assume that the people can run with it and do more. But, I'm trying to help people get that first one. I think a lot of my listeners are new or younger, or they've never done something like this. I'm trying to kick them out of the nest to get that really one.
Be mindful of tomorrow as you're working on today, because again, because PR and media relations is designed to be a more long-form success aspect, everything you do today reflects on what you're doing tomorrow. So, to get the first story, you treat people like people. You're polite to them on the phone. If they aren't interested in it, then you say thank you and you move on to the next person on your list.
Right.
Sometimes you'll get it where a journalist is like, well, this really isn't exactly what I cover, but this person might be, and he might give you the contact information of who you should reach out to. Right. You're always free to ask, assuming the phone call you have time on the phone call, you're always free to ask, okay, well, what does interest you? What's the type of thing that might appeal to you in the future, so that when I have something else along those lines, I can come back to you, and I know you might be more interested in it. It's gathering that data. But if the first person you speak to says no, it's fine. Most publications have 3 or 4 people that are writing along the same topic lines. You just move on to the next. With it, whatever field you're looking at, there are multiple publications, blogs, podcasts, whatever. You just move on to the next person. It's not a personal attack. They just might not be interested. Timing might not be good, and you move on. And then next time you come back to them and try again. But it's again, numbers, consistency, and just going out until you get some interest. And even if you get that first interest, even if there's a story that really clicks with one journalist, it doesn't mean automatically it's going to click with 20 more. So you just kind of, you have that picture, you have that angle storyline that you're going out with. But, don't be married to it. Be able to be flexible in that storyline, alter it depending on how that conversation's going with who you're talking to, or what the email correspondence is like, and be free to say, all right, maybe not this, but this angle also is something that we can talk about, and it seems like you're working on something similar, so we might be able to enhance that story.
Right. All right, man, good stuff. Where's the best place for people to learn more about you? Where do you want them to connect?
My website is glasslanternpr.com, and I also write for fridgebusiness.com.
Fridge Business.
Yes.
All right. We'll have to talk about that next time.
All right. Thanks.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. Show feedback and guest suggestions are always welcome. Let me know what topics you'd like me to cover and any cool guys or gals you'd like me to interview. You can hit me up at wes@thesaleswhisperer.com. And if you want some affordable, live, interactive help from me and my team twice a month, check out marketingautomationnetwork.com. marketingautomation.com. Even if you don't have an email or a CRM tool running yet, there is no other place on earth where you can get direct access to my team and me to answer your questions and record the answers and give you access to those sessions. You'll get access to the entire archive of sessions going back several years. So head on over to marketingautomationnetwork.com and sign up now. Remember to subscribe to the show, write me a review in iTunes, and I will love you long time. And please tell your friends, all right? The best compliment you can give is to share your feedback with a review and telling your friends about the show. Thanks for listening, and remember to sell different.